Hey, it's Sandra. Welcome to another episode of Asexualise, my asexual life. This is the place to be for education about asexuality, so subscribe and hit the bell icon right now. So happy Asexual Spectres Awareness Month, celebrating our diversity across the asexual spectrum and our differences within it. And tonight I'm going to be reading from Asexual Perspectives book. Could be this morning or today where you are. This book I published in 2017. It is a best-selling asexual book. It's Asexual Perspectives on Amazon. I interviewed 46 asexuals for this book, and you get to interview me at the end of the book. And in this book, asexuals share their perspectives on love, life, sex, relationships, difference between sexual attraction, sexual desire, arousal, and so much more. So if you're confused about all those things, please do get a copy of this book because you'll understand far more about asexuality in the asexual spectrum and attraction. So tonight I'm going to be reading from this, or today, this morning, wherever you are, and we're going to be sharing and discussing asexual views on why society doesn't accept asexuality and what can be done about this. So we're going to go to Robin's story first. This is on page 41 if you've got the printed edition of Asexual Perspectives book. So why do you feel in general that society doesn't accept asexuality as a form of sexual orientation in its own right, and what can be done about this? I think the argument that crops up often is about how exactly we are oppressed. For example, gay people have been killed or their lives ruined by homophobia. It is thought that asexuals aren't oppressed in the same way, so asexuality shouldn't really be a minority sexual orientation in its own right. A lot of people also think it's impossible not to feel sexual attraction to others. They think that the lack of interest in having sex stems from being a late bloomer. However, this is invalidation, erasure, and oppression in its own right. I think promoting ACE awareness is the best way to stand up to this erasure, whether people believe us or not. So I do think it's very ignorant for people to say stuff like you're just a late bloomer, you haven't met the right person yet, there's something wrong with you, what did you do to make yourself be asexual, and all this other load of rubbish questions and statements we get chucked at us. And it is very invalidating. Like, heterosexuals don't usually have to validate why they're heterosexual. And I think if you want equality in society, then if we have to validate why we're asexual, then all sexual orientations, including heterosexuals, should be doing the same. Like, why is a person heterosexual? Why aren't they asexual? Why aren't they bisexual? Why aren't they pansexual? Why aren't they homosexual? And so there has to be some sort of equality. Otherwise, it literally is very invalidating, and it's also very discriminatory, I think, as well. It is sad when people have to explain why they are the way they are. Ex dude. Yes, I totally agree with you. It is really, really sad. Thank you for being here, by the way. Lots of love to you. It is really, really sad. And I think it's deeply unfair for some people to have to validate why they're here and other people don't. I think it's very damaging. And I think if people are not going to accept asexuality, then why should everyone accept heterosexuality? Why do people just think, oh, it's okay to be heterosexual, but it's not okay to be asexual? Like, for asexuals who don't want sex, there's going to be much less likely to be a person sexually abusing someone if that person's asexual and they don't want sex in the first place. So, in other words, people are generally safer sexually around asexuals who don't want sex than they would be around sexuals who do really get obsessed with sex. And so They should be thinking that's actually favourable to have someone who you're sexually more safe with, not the opposite way around and trying to pick faults with us. So I think people's attitudes and the way people think really needs to be expanded upon and thought out more thoroughly, you know? Because people get so sex obsessed, and there's so many people thinking, oh, it's so good to be sex obsessed. No, it isn't. Sex obsession can lead to porn addiction, can lead to rape, can lead to sexual violence, can lead to human trafficking, and a multitude of other unsavory things. So why it's paraded around as some magnificent thing that every relationship has to have is just beyond belief, really. It's a complete brainwashing. I'm not saying it's wrong for every person in the world to have sex. I'm not saying it's wrong for people to have sex, full stop. What I'm saying is it's wrong to parade sex as some sort of major accomplishment and obsession that you've got to have in a relationship that you cannot be without. Otherwise, you can't have a relationship and you can't have a life. It's just not healthy to be thinking of sex in such an obsessive, centralized way. There needs to be diversity in the world. There needs to be a range of flavors of relationships, not just one specific way of being. I mean, what about the people in the world that aren't asexual but are impotent, for example? They can't have sex, or they can't do it enough, or they can't get it up enough. They're made to feel very embarrassed, very small. They're shoved products to tell them, correct your problem. Buy Viagra to give you an erection. Buy this, that, and the other because you're inadequate. It's what it's saying. But what if people just accepted that people are different and people have different appetites for things, and people like things and other people don't like things, and sometimes people's bodies are made differently. Some people's bodies are made more for sex, other people's bodies are made not to have sex. Some people are wired differently, whether that's neurologically, whether that is physiologically, or whether it's just the fact they don't have those feelings and they don't have those needs and they don't have those urges and they don't have those wants. It's fine to be like that. It's fine to be different. Why is everyone hell bent on trying to make people like robots, where they go to work, they get married, they have kids, they live together basically, and then they do maybe a few hobbies and interests, see a few friends, and die? It's just ridiculous. There should be lots of different flavors of relationships included in society so that people think they can find someone. I feel sorry for the people that are impotent, that really feel that they can't come out about that, and that feel they can't get anyone to love them because they feel they let them down because they can't perform sexually, or they can't do that at all, and they must feel very lonely and empty if they want to have a relationship. But most of the people who come into contact with want sex and they can't do it. Obviously, some impotent people might be happy like asexuals are on their own and single and not need anyone anyway. But with society shoving down the throat that everyone's got to have sex and there's something wrong if you don't, not only is it damaging to asexuals and sex repulsed people, some heterosexuals can be penetration repulsed as well without actually being asexual. It's also damaging to the people who can't have sex for some other reasons, such as they are impotent or they've had an accident which prevents them from having sex. Don't those people deserve love as well, and a committed relationship and monogamy without sex? Of course they do. It's absolutely ridiculous to just think that everyone in society should be having sex. It's logical, very, very logical, that not everyone in life likes everything. Not everyone in life loves everything. Some people, the majority of people, probably love chocolate cake, but do you know, for some people, it makes them feel sick. They feel sickly when they have chocolate cake, and they don't have chocolate cake because they don't like it. It's too rich, it's too sickly for them. It's like blur for them, so don't eat chocolate cake, right? But you would say that everyone likes chocolate or everyone likes chocolate cake. No, they don't. No, they don't. So why don't people accept the fact that not everyone likes, wants, or needs sex? It doesn't mean to say something's wrong. It just means to say they are different to the majority population, and there's nothing wrong in that. Just imagine if we were all allowed to have all different types of relationships. Some could involve sex if that's what the people wanted and liked and all enjoyed it, it's consensual, and other people were just as valid in their relationships and happy and healthy by not having sex, by focusing on deep emotional connection, by focusing on having mental connection together and 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 a spiritual connection together, fostering more growth mindset together, growing and growing and going to places together, fostering love and care and commitment and reliability and sensitivity and empathy. All these qualities are vastly needed in relationships, but are often so overlooked by deep sexual attraction and sexual obsession. Right? There's nothing wrong with being sexually attracted, but if someone is sex obsessed and that takes over them, then they forget a lot of the time of the other elements of a relationship that are so important. And compatibility is the main crux of the matter for relationships. And yes, that can have a sexual component. Yes, if someone is deeply into sex and loves it and wants it 55,000 times a week, that might be a bit of exaggeration, but wants it every single day, maybe even multiple times a day, and you've got a sex repulsed asexual who can't stand sex and wants monogamy, that ain't going to work, is it? They're incompatible. Right? And obviously some sexuals and some asexuals are incompatible because they both want completely different things sexually. But there might also be some sexuals in the world that really aren't that bothered about sex because they're not having it now. Maybe they've done without it for years because maybe they're not that interested. Their hobbies are more interesting, their friends are more interesting, going to places is more interesting. Maybe they've just not actually found the right person to be in a relationship, and they find an asexual person. They're like, wow, I didn't think I wasn't going to have sex because I thought maybe I probably would, being the fact I'm heterosexual, but actually I've lived without sex for what, like 8 years now in adulthood, and I don't really miss it, and I don't go after it, and I don't watch porn, or I watch very little porn, and I'm not really that interested in sex. But to have a human connection with another person who can love me and be kind and caring and thoughtful and reliable and sensitive and empathetic, and I get this in an asexual person. I'm not saying all asexuals are like this, because they're not, but I'm saying just imagine if that was available from an asexual person and the sexual person's been without sex and they're a virgin still, and they might be thinking, well, I don't really need it. I'm like, for example, I'm like 26 now. I was an adult at 18. I've spent 8 years of my adult life not having sex. I don't really think I would miss it if I never had it. So why not be with an asexual person if the right asexual person came along for the sexual person? Do you know what I mean? So I think society should be much more open to different types of relationships. And what actually makes a healthy relationship really has got nothing to do with sex. And sex is something that could be added to the relationship or not, depending on the people involved and their wants and their needs and their desires. But even if you've got sexual attraction between two people, if they're not compatible in other ways, if they're not reliable with each other, if they're not consistent with each other, if they're not persistent, if they don't have excellent communication skills between each other, if they don't match each other's needs, if there's an imbalance in the relationship in other ways, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work in a healthy way. It's going to not work in the right way. It's not going to be sustainable. And yes, people do change, sadly. They change sometimes. Sometimes they can be in a relationship with someone for years and these people grow apart, or they just transform in different ways in their life, which means they're not compatible anymore. But also, people can grow together by expressing needs, by realizing that person's worth and value more to them, realizing that, wow, I wouldn't want to be without this person in my life. Like, my life would be a lot more shit now without this person in my life. I really value this person. I treasure this person. And maybe that person saying, I don't want to lose this person, as a sexual person, say it to an asexual person. Because maybe they realise what an asexual brings to the table. Because an asexual is not so sex obsessed or not interested in sex at all, then they bring other valuable qualities to a relationship or potential relationship. And they focus so much more on other things. And just imagine if you're a sexual person who does have problems with anxiety when performing sex, and it makes you really nervous, and you're like, oh my God, this woman expects me to do this, that, and the other, and I really get tired, I'm not really up for it, and I get bored or whatever, or I don't really like doing it, or I'm not that interested, or I don't know, a number of different things, but I love cuddling and I love kissing and I love feeling the warmth of my girl saying goodbye to me when I leave to go to work, or sends me a morning text saying how much she cares about me and thinking of me, especially if you haven't had that in previous times in your life. I think what's so sad though is some people, they get into a relationship with someone and they're not used to being treated well, and that person treats them really well, and then they take that person for granted. And instead of truly appreciating that person and thinking, oh, wow, this person's staying with me through thick and thin. They're still with me now. They're still with me through the bad times and the good times, and cherishing that person. It seems like to me, like after a while, people get complacent. They don't value the person as much because they're like around them and it's familiar to them, which I think is completely backward thinking. I think it's completely backwards. And it's weird, however, that sex is such a familiar part of society, but sex never seems to be too familiar. People don't seem to get bored of sex or complacent with sex like they do actually in friendships or relationships. And I think this is crazy. I'm like, how come that you're so stimulated by sex and you could stay with someone for years and years, even if the relationship isn't great because of the sex? And you don't get complacent about the sex, but you get complacent about the person, or don't value the person enough, don't say consistently value them, and they just take them for granted. I think it's really, really weird. So, Siljay's story. Why do you feel in general that society doesn't accept asexuality as a form of sexual orientation in its own right, and what can be done about this? I feel that society does not accept asexuality as a form of sexual orientation because it loves to cling to the ever-shifting idea of normal, hyphenated normal, and conforming to it, as well as the phrase, it has always been done this way, that way, to the point where it becomes justification for behaviours and actions. I'm not sure what can be done about this, but if society learned how to see people as people first instead of everything else, religion, race, gender, sexuality, etc., it would be easier to validate asexuality as a sexual orientation. So, yes, it is really sad that people do have a lot of the ideology that if it's been done this way before, then it always needs to be it always needs to be kept being done this way. But if things didn't change, shifts didn't happen in the world, there would be no innovation. There would actually be no AI right now, right? If no one invented AI, if no one got like innovative and decided to change the way things are, we wouldn't even be in an age now where AI is taking over a lot of things. Dude, I love that you bring up different perspectives and talk about valid situations for different people. Oh, thank you, Dude. Thanks a lot. Appreciate you. And so yeah, I just find it very, very strange, that people are okay with things in one area, but they don't translate that to other areas. Like there's loads of things that change with time, but why isn't the nature of our relationships changing more? Why is it still very sex focused? even now, when over the years, like I said, with AI technology, just imagine that. You had things like 3D glasses coming years ago as well, 3D TVs. Someone had to be different and change the ideology of what looks good on telly and how it's calibrated and with pixels, how it's perceived, to invent that technology. They had to create a demand for it, usually. This is what happens. People have to create a demand for something, and then they base a product or service on that demand. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be that much demand for sexless relationships, because sexless relationships has a very negative, how can I put it? People have very negative views of sexless relationships. Sexless is seen as something that's lacking, but in a negative way. You can be lacking in something, but in a good way. I lack the ability to have drugs because I've never taken drugs in my life. I'm very against drugs personally. I can't stand them. Right? So some lacking of some abilities is good. I'm very intolerant to a lot of foods and I have a lot of food allergies. Now you could argue that's a really bad thing, but a lot of the foods that I'm allergic to or got intolerances to that can't have is really bad for fibromyalgia. And guess what? I have fibromyalgia. So for example, if I was eating wheat right now, I'd probably be in bed with so much pain, bedridden, not have much energy at all. Especially if I ate sugar as well. But sugar and wheat are two of my main worst allergies, which I don't eat. And I have to be disciplined not to do that. But it's for my own benefit. But most people with fibromyalgia don't think there's a problem with them. And they are not disciplined to give them up. They will just keep having pain. And they will just keep going, oh, I'm so much pain. I'm tired. I haven't done anything. Why? If you're not going to try to improve your life or do anything about things like this, then you're going to get that result, aren't you? I admire people who try. I'm not saying you're not going to get any pain and be tired, because fibromyalgia is a chronic pain condition that affects the nerves and muscles of the body. It is hardcore. I have to live with it every single day of my life. I got diagnosed in 2012 and we're in 2024 right now, and symptoms came on in 2010. She usually got through trauma, and I've had every type of trauma. So it's hardcore, and I got back injury, so it doesn't make it easy. But my point is sometimes you can be a person who actually doesn't go well with something or doesn't need something or shouldn't be having something. It's actually better for you. You could be lacking in something, or as in not having it, and it's actually a good thing. Now, I don't want to try everything in my life, because to try everything in your life would be effing up my body. It'd be putting toxic crap, excuse my language, into my body. I don't want to F my body up like that. My body is in enough pain and problems as it is. Right? And so just because we don't have something or don't want to have something or don't have the ability to have something doesn't mean to say it's a bad thing. And sexless relationships are seen as like, instead of seeing their sex less, as in we have less sex or we don't have any sex. Sexless means we don't have any sex actually, but it doesn't mean to say it's a bad thing. But people go, oh, I've been in a marriage for like 20 years and the last 5 years have been sexless. It's so horrible. No, what the problem is you've lost connection with your partner, which means that you don't have to have sex to regain connection. You can do other things to regain that connection. It's actually the connection and closeness that usually people have lost. Because for some people, for many people, sex involves having emotional responses together, and it technically, physiologically and emotionally brings you to bonding more with that person. But there are a multitude of ways to bond with that person without having sex. Ex-dude in chat. It was very hard to be in a religion that pushes procreation, and a lot of the older folks would try to set me up with their kids. They didn't understand that I was totally comfortable being single. Oh, that's not good. Yeah, there's Asexuals in this Asexual Perspectives book, which you can get on Amazon if you want to grab a copy, by the way. There's someone, I think it's I think there's someone in this book that says that they tried to get, they would try to be paired off with people. But there's also someone I'm thinking of actually in one of my asexual groups, can't reveal their name, obviously, but they say that they had people trying to pair them up with someone, and they're asexual and they're not interested. They like being on their own. I love being single, but sometimes I really do wish that I had a partner. So I get 50-50 on it. Like, part of me really loves being single. I love my freedom. I love to be able to do what I want when I want. But there's still a huge part of me as a romantic asexual, who hyper romantic I might add, who does want a serious committed relationship with a really loving, caring, reliable guy. At the moment, I can't see that happening at all. I'm on a dating detox, but I'd like to have like a bestest friend who actually treat me like a best friend and who actually wants to spend a lot of time with me like I would with him, and be bestest ever friends and hang out a lot together. I think that's so important. But I equally love being single as well. I just think there is value in both if you get the right person. If not, it's better to be on your own forever. But I think the more asexuality is talked about, the more opportunities there are for asexuals to meet someone who accepts them for who they are and loves them for who they are. It is, of course, always more difficult when you're asexual and sex repulsed, for example, because a lot of the world does still revolve around having sex, and still that shifts and relationships are valued for a multitude of other things rather than the sex. It still makes it very difficult. I think if people really understood the value of relationships and serious committed relationships, and I think if less people were avoidant in the world, there's a lot of avoidant attachment styles out there. I'm not saying it's their fault, because attachment styles have got through traumatic childhoods, and a lot of avoidance out there are avoiding intimacy. They find it better to be on their own than in an intimate relationship. They find more value on their own. I'm not saying this is wrong, but I'm saying that if you want to get into a relationship and there tends to be more avoidant guys, for example, on dating sites, it makes it a lot harder, because you've got to have equal commitment, you and that person, equal investment in the relationship, equal effort in the relationship, equality in the relationship, feeling like you're both wanting to see each other, you're both wanting to spend time with each other, people making plans to see each other, not just one person asking most of the time, both people actively saying, like, when can we get together this month? When's the next time we're seeing each other? Making plans, putting stuff in the diary, putting stuff in the calendar, video calling, phone calling, all this type of thing. And if you've got avoidance, they find a lot more value in being on their own, avoiding intimate relationships and stuff. So that throws another spanner in the works, not just being asexual and not wanting sex. Because if you're asexual and don't want sex, and asexuals genuinely and generally love for a deep emotional connection, avoidance tend to be difficult at having an emotional connection with their partner because they're avoiding intimacy, and they feel it's better to be on their own and not have that emotional intimacy because it scares them. And so that can make things harder. But if we focus more on relationships with emotional intimacy at their core rather than sex, then it would be a lot better, I think, for relationships in general in society. And I think asexuality as a sexual orientation would be seen more in a positive light, because it'd be, hey, if people knew that asexuals in general love for a deep emotional connection, that's what our love's based on, people might be more positively leaning towards that if they realize a healthy relationship is meant to be based on emotional intimacy and connection the most, and compatibility, rather than sex, which is a physical act, which doesn't have to have an emotional connection. People can just desire the sex without actually having a deep emotional connection. It can bond you physiologically more and emotionally because you've had sex, but it doesn't necessarily make you more emotionally connected in a healthy way to sustain for a period of time, a long period of time together forever type thing. So it's hard. It's not easy out there to have healthy relationships as it is, but healthy relationships are born on emotional intimacy, healthy relationships, and emotional regulation, which is hard to do if you've had trauma. For anyone in their childhood has had trauma, it's hard to regulate your own emotions. I find it hard to regulate my own emotions in a relationship. I find it easier to do that on my own because I've only got myself to worry about and think about usually. So, everyone's got their own problems from childhood usually, and we have to try and help ourselves as much as possible. But if we realize that all healthy relationships require emotional connection, require a high level of communication and compatibility, then we start to uncover the fact that sex should not be the main component first and foremost in a relationship. It should be the other stuff. And then sex should just be like a side thing, not the main thing. It should be like, people need to participate in a hobby and maybe that's their hobby together or not, you know? So I think relationships, until people actually see what healthy relationships and happy relationships are based on the most, I think people won't understand the value of asexuality and what asexuals bring to the table. We may be a minority sexual orientation, but I think there's something special in asexuality. I think there's something special that the world isn't seeing and appreciating in us. I think there's something very special that brings tears to my eyes, actually. I think there's something very special about asexuals, very special about asexual relationships and what asexuals can bring to the table in a relationship. They can bring that true, pure soul love. They can bring that emotional, deep connection. Of course, if someone's avoidant in attachment style, they're not really going to want emotional connection, which is a major problem. But that's even a problem in heterosexual relationships, which involve sex, So I think much work has to be done to see the value of asexuality as an equal to all the other sexualities. And you could argue brings a fantastic new perspective, with AI coming out as the latest technology and different way of doing things. Why can't people accept more asexuality and the fact there's another sexual orientation that's not much talked about or widely known about that can bring a fresh perspective to relationships that can be nuanced and can focus much more on other aspects other than sex? And why can't people see this is the future? This is actually more modern. This is just like AI's modern and the future, whether we like it or not. It's here. It has been here for some time in the background with systems and technology and automating parts on websites and email lists and all that lot. But it's now obviously replacing some human jobs because they're scaling it up and making artificial intelligence more intelligent and more interactive with humans and bringing it to the forefront more. But why can't asexuality be the new modern AI, if you like? Asexuality intelligence. That's what it should be called. I think I need to coin that phrase. Asexuality intelligence. You heard it here first. I might do a video about that. And I could do lots of things about that. Oh, excuse me. I burped and I've got a digestive problem. Excuse me. Live on air. How terrible. Asexuality intelligence is here, people. Yes, I'm here to spread the word about it. So I think this is a major, major discovery, actually. I think it's the future. And I think asexuality genuinely brings to the table, to the relationship table, to the interactive table, a fresh way of being that other people misunderstand, misinterpret, but actually can help society in so many ways. It can help people to have better relationships by focusing on all the other stuff without involving sex. Yes, some asexuals have sex. For those asexuals that have sex, they might not want sex as much as the majority of sexuals do, for example. But for asexuals that have sex, don't have any problem having sex, are sex positive, they can fit in with the sexual society more, and they can have relationships with heterosexuals more, or different sexuals, bisexuals, homosexuals, whatever gender they're into. But for the asexuals that in general don't like sex, don't want it, don't need it, or are very repulsed by it, we bring a very fresh element to the world that is different, but I think needs to be more recognized for its precious gifts. The gift of having those connections without the sex or sexual attraction. The gift, in some cases, of being able to have physical touch, sensual touch, without the need, urge, or want for sex. It means you can have the physical, sensual feelings without the need to perform, without the need to go on to other things, without having to meet expectations that maybe you're just too tired for. But maybe a kiss and a cuddle and a warm embrace makes you feel good after a hard day's work. But expecting you to have sex and do that when you're just like, I'm tired, it's not good. But a nice cuddle, a kiss, a hair stroke makes you feel like, oh, I've had a hard day at work. Come here, I'll stroke your hair. Come here, I'll give you a kiss. Come here, I'll give you a cuddle and embrace. How good does that feel? How good does that feel? I think the world needs more asexuals. I think the world needs more asexuality. And I think the world needs to understand asexuality more. And I think that asexuals don't like, want, or need sex, don't get those feelings, don't get those urges. I think they are a little bit underrepresented. And I think that more of us should experience more validation, should experience more generosity from people's understanding about us. In other words, people should try to understand us more. Like, what makes asexuals different is we lack sexual attraction in general. But obviously, for the people who are on the asexual spectrum who love sex, maybe for the physical feelings it gives, maybe the asexuals who are sex positive and have just as much sex as a heterosexual person does, for example, maybe it's not so noticeable, the differences with them in the way they love and the way they have relationships. But there's something very interesting about the asexuals that can, for example, kiss without a need to go further or want to go further. There's a lot of value in asexuals who don't get those urges or want at all for sex, who aren't interested in it, who don't value genitalia, who aren't interested in genitalia and anything else but a performery function of going to the toilet, for example. Who don't need to see body parts in order to fall in love and be in love with someone. So I think it's very, very important that we understand how much asexuality does in fact bring to the table and how it can actually improve relationships and how it can bring balance into the world. And if you can hear noises, it's because I got my windows open in the UK and I live near a road. So it's very, very important that you understand how important asexuality is and how much we can give to society and how much we can bring to the table and insight we can give into relationships. I hope one day that you see lots more asexuals in conversations on chat shows, magazines, newspapers, that you see a lot more education and you understand what asexuals can bring to the table in the world. It's a beautiful thing, really. Right. So, Kenneth Williams' story, Asexual Perspectives book on Amazon. Page 67, if you're following along at home with the printed edition. Why do you feel in general that society doesn't accept asexuality as a form of sexual orientation in its own right, and what can be done about this? It would help if not having sex wasn't seen as a bad thing or as an insult. The asexual nerd who can't get laid, stereotype. Having it mentioned in sex ed classes would also be a good start. If it becomes more well known, then I think more people will come to accept it, as well as younger asexuals not feeling confused or broken. It also may be hard for asexuals to wrap their head around the idea that someone might not want or even hate something they love and crave. Sex is everywhere, and while I'm okay with that, it doesn't make it more difficult to realise not everyone wants it. Oh, sorry. And while I'm okay with that, it does make it more difficult to realise not everyone wants it. I might have said doesn't make it more difficult to realise not everyone wants it, but this person said, and while I'm okay with it, it doesn't make it more, it does make it more difficult to realise not everyone wants it. I keep wanting to say the opposite because I'm like, why don't people just realise that not everyone wants it, you know? So I'm gonna move my foot a minute because it's hurting. I got my laptop in between my legs, which sounds very rude, but it's not meant to be. So I can be like near the TV screen, near the laptop screen. Oh my gosh! But I know some people watch me on TV. According to my stats, hello to all the TV watchers out there. You got me on big TV, thank you. So, yeah. So let's just go into Kenneth's story a bit more, right? I hate that stereotype of you just can't get laid. It's so invalidating, ridiculous, and insulting, right? I get loads of offers of sex all the time, and I'm a sex repulsed asexual. Like, I could easily get sex. It actually shocks me when some sexuals go, "Oh, I've got to hire a prostitute to have sex." It's like, why? I can easily get sex and I'm asexual. Why would you need to do that? Like, it's just like ridiculous. And you don't ever hear of people complaining to them, like going, "Oh, you just can't get laid and you're sexual. That's why you've got to have a prostitute." But that's probably actually a lot more truth in that. Like some guys, they can't actually get sex from a girl on a dating site, so they do hire a prostitute, right? So I think it's really important to know that there are a lot of asexuals who do get proposed marriage, who do get invited on dates, who do get chatted up, who do get flirted with, and who has the option of having sex, who has lots of people after them for sex. Some asexuals do. I have a lot of guys who would love to have sex with me. If I liked sex, it would be easy for me to get it. And I don't like sex, so I disappoint a lot of guys, but I'm glad because I'm really not interested in that. Right? But it's just so insulting and ridiculous. I had this one guy on Badoo when I was active on there, and he was a British guy. And at first I thought he's really respectful because we had a video date and we were going to meet up for an in-person date. And he said that after the call, he texts when I text him to say where I was gonna like him my phone number for when we met up. He said, "Oh, I'm gonna be honest, I actually do really need sex, so it's better that we don't meet up." Which I thought, okay, you could argue he led me on a bit, actually saying he would like to be with an asexual person. He thinks it'd be good for him not to have sex, right? So to change his story around, but I was glad he told me the truth as quick as possible after the video date when I text him. It would be nice if he just told me on the video date, or it would be nice if he texted me that first. But anyway, to cut a long story short, that was the end of that. And then he came back on Badoo again. And this actually happened a number of times that he came back on Badoo and kept trying to connect with me. But the second time that he came back on there, of which I actually decided to accept his request, I think there was maybe some other times I didn't, but then I decided like, oh right, okay, it's like he's he's connecting with me again. I don't know why, so I'm going to find out why. And then I was so shocked to see that he was asking me to be his sugar mummy. It's like sickening to me. No offense to the actual sugar mummies who enjoy that type of thing. One is I do not want to mummy a guy. I like younger guys, but not to mother. I do not want to do cooking for a guy, cleaning for a guy, or any of those mummy stuff. I am not a mummy at all. I never wanted kids. I knew since 15 I didn't want kids. And there is no way I like a younger guy to mother whatsoever. If he wants to look after me, that's fine. But I ain't looking after him in the physical sense. Yes, emotionally I'm good, mentally and spiritually, but I have fibromyalgia and I'm not interested in causing myself more pain by doing housework for a guy. It's not happening, right? So But being a sugar mummy means paying a younger guy for sex, and I'm like, I don't have to pay for I'm not a sugar mummy, I don't have to pay for sex. I can easily get loads of young guys to have sex with me if I wanted to, and I'm not interested. So it's so insulting when a person thinks you can't get laid and that's why you're asexual. It's like, no, I have loads of guys after me for sex. I don't want like or need sex. I don't get those urges. I don't miss those urges. I don't get those urges. I don't miss having sex because I never want it. I don't miss what I'm not needing, wanting, craving because I'm not having those feelings in the first place. And they just don't get asexuality, right? Of course, asexuality is a spectrum. I think that's why it's so confusing. Because if there's a sex positive asexual who, by and large, has sex as much as a sexual person does, you could argue in that relationship there isn't much difference with what's physically happening, regardless of the fact that that person doesn't experience sexual attraction or doesn't experience it in the same way and lacks the usual sexual attraction. But for the asexuals who don't want sex, don't like it, don't need it, don't get an urge or want for it at all, it's like we just don't have those feelings. We don't miss what we don't have. We're not suppressing or repressing anything because we don't have those things to suppress and repress in the first place. So we are not shutting ourselves off or stopping ourselves doing something that we don't want to do because we don't want to do it in the first place. And I think this is so important. And this is deeply misunderstood. And it's hard for sexuals to wrap their head around why an asexual person would have sex, for example, just as much as a sexual person would, for those asexuals that do have sex. Because they're like, well, how's that any different? So it makes it harder for them to understand asexuality. Asexuality is the spectrum ranging from those pure asexuals who don't experience any sexual attraction whatsoever, going to the grey asexuals that do experience sexual attraction. Either they experience it but not enough to want to act on it, or they only experience it under limited, rare, or specific circumstances. Most of the times they don't. Right, so it is a spectrum, but it can be so confusing for sexuals to even understand asexuality. The fact there's a spectrum makes it harder for them. So I do get that. But the fact that people think that asexuals can't get laid and that's why they're asexual and not having sex is absolutely ludicrous. There are people that are not asexual that actually choose to abstain from sex and not have sex. Doesn't mean to say they can't have it if they wanted to have it. It means they're abstaining. Asexuality is not the same as abstaining. Abstaining is a choice. Asexuality is not a choice, it's a sexual orientation. But still, asexuals can choose whether to have sex or not. But for sex repulsed asexuals, they'll often feel they don't have a choice because they would always default to don't want sex if they're sex repulsed, usually. Doesn't necessarily mean to say that, but the majority of asexuals who are sex repulsed will feel like it's their default, it's their wiring that makes them not want sex on an innate level. And that's very static and finalized and stuck like that. So they might feel that there would be no choice, as in the sense there would be no option because they'd be so repulsed by it and vulgared out by it, maybe even thrown up physically by it, that there is no choice but to not have it. A bit like when someone's massively allergic to something and they've got an anaphylactic shock and it could kill them. I know you might say that sex can't kill someone, but it could kill their how can I put it? It can kill their soul if they're doing something that's abusive towards themselves. So yes, they might still be alive, but so it's not exactly the same as an anaphylactic shock. But it could still send them into a panic attack. It could still be very bad for their body, because if they're having sex and they don't really want it, it can actually cause physical damage because their private, their genitals tense up and stuff like that. So there can be serious physical consequences as mental, emotional, and all that lot. So it can be very traumatic. And asexuality is not a result of trauma and that's it. Because if someone's traumatized by having a bad sexual experience, then obviously you need to work with a therapist to work through that trauma. However, it doesn't mean to say that some asexuals haven't had sexual trauma, because a lot of asexuals that don't want sex or need sex or like it in the first place could have a partner still pounce on them. They could have someone still having sex without consent and basically sexually abusing them. Because asexuals who never want sex in the first place, if society continues with this notion that everyone really wants sex, everyone's got to have sex, it's what's expected and what should happen, then this is why asexuals can end up in sexual abuse situations, because people, instead of asking and getting consent, people just expect it and force it on someone. And this is disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. I think there's not enough information in schools as well about sexual abuse and what that actually entails and how important consent is and how important it is to understand that not every person in the world wants sex. But if we're sending this damaging message in society that everyone wants sex and relationships are supposed to have it, that makes people feel entitled that they should be having it. And then if they feel entitled and they're not getting it, they might get frustrated, stroppy, aggressive, a number of other things, and just take sex for themselves anyway, which is disgusting. There seems to be such a lack of communication in the world, but that, like if a girl says she doesn't want sex, you don't need to go on and on and on at her to wear her down till she says yes either. I mean, that is like coerced sex, which is still sexual abuse, even if she did say yes. I'm saying she and he, but you can swap out for whatever genders you're interested in and into. And so there really needs to be massive change in this. And I do wish schools would have asexuality more well known about and talked about, because then there would be a lot less younger people feeling broken, because there are some young people in the world right now that are asexual and they just don't realize they are, and they don't understand what's going on when their friends are saying, oh, look who's hot, look who's having sex with who, look who's getting off with who, look who's doing this sexual act and that sexual act, and oh, what did you do summer, or we got off with guys all summer, or whatever that, you know what I mean, all this sexual behavior and all this sex centered stuff, right? Some people, some children right now, teenagers for example, are thinking that I just don't get it. I don't understand what all the hype is about. I don't understand why people are into this. It just doesn't resonate with me. And they might feel like they're lonely, left out, broken, something's wrong with them. They're not, they're just asexual. But they've been brought up and programmed and conditioned to believe they're meant to be otherwise. And so something feels off and not quite right, and they're not sure what it is. Just imagine what we could do if we had a lot more education. Right. Zoe's story, Asexual Perspectives. Why do you feel in general that society doesn't accept asexuality as a form of sexual orientation in its own right, and what can be done about it? I think the term is too alien for them. They cannot relate to this concept. Therefore, it cannot exist. I'm going to move you up a little bit. If you have no sex, then you cannot have a sexual orientation. I think this term should be added to any sex education and human biology taught in schools, if not already done so. Children and teenagers need to hear it from a young age, so they will grow up with it and know it's a valid concept and that it can be applied to them, as the case may be, without fear of ridicule or rejection or misunderstanding. As for adults exposure is needed. Visibility through media attention, newspaper articles, internet, books, TV, movies, documentaries, etc. So the term asexuality becomes commonplace, valid, understood, and accepted, not just a passing fad. I totally agree with that 100%. I was just talking about that, wasn't I? Saying, it should be more well known on TV, magazines, newspapers, and things like that. And the more people are exposed to something, the more people do get used to it. That's the thing known in psychology and conditioning, whatever you're conditioning to believe. That's why people are so focused on sex, because years ago people decided to bring sex to the forefront, and then that's all the mass advertising. And the more people see it that are wired that way, the more people want it. And the more people condition their brain to believe that that's what they're meant to be doing, the more a lot of them will want it. With asexuals, we're genuinely wired different, so it doesn't work with us. A lot of that psychology and advertising just doesn't work on us. We're kind of like, oh my God, not again. Give us a break. Let's talk about something else. Can we please not have this sex scene right now in this movie, which would otherwise be quite good? Can we please not have them doing this, that, and the other? But until society sees a value in sexless relationships or less sex in relationships, then this is going to be harder to achieve the fact that people see a different way of being. So, to continue with the Zoe story, it should be added to the curriculum for medical students. That's a very good point. Doctors also need to realize asexuality exists, that it is valid, and that their asexual patients are normal in this sense. I think that would help a lot, especially if you had school children who had anxiety or depression, for example, or college people, and it's because they're different. I think all the counsellors in colleges and schools should know and understand it. So to continue what they were saying about doctors also need to realize asexuality exists, that it is valid, and that their asexual patients are normal in this sense. They do not have a low sex drive, are not inhibited, frigid, prudish, and they most certainly do not need to relax. I wonder if it shows I've had experience with this type of narrow-mindedness. Yeah, saying to asexuals like you're frigid or prudish or inhibited and need to just relax or chill out, it's just ridiculous. It's very invalidating, very dismissing of our feelings, and it's it's just rude and obnoxious, quite frankly. And there are lots of people in the world that are not asexual that at times they don't want sex either. And if they say no, that's okay. It doesn't mean they're frigid or prudish or whatever other rubbish or insulting words you want to throw at them just to get your own way and have sex. That's all it is to coerce people into having sex, but to make you feel bad about yourself if you don't have sex. Oh, feel bad about yourself. So basically, you change and have it. So you prove you're not prudish or prove you're not frigid. It's ridiculous and very, very bad. So, to continue with Zoe's story again, people know and believe the term asexual when applied to plants and amoebas. Why is it so difficult to believe it also applies in the human realm? I think it's because people are always afraid of what they don't know or understand. If you're asexual, you must be a freak, and freaks scare people. There's actually nothing freaky about asexuality, though. Asexuality has been around for years, just that people didn't know what to call it years ago. People would have what they call platonic relationships, which might very well have been asexual relationships, relationships without sex, and they just didn't know what to call asexuality. So it's still a relatively new term, but the actual relationships without having sex involved have existed for lots of years. Right. So, Fiora's story. Why do you feel in general that society doesn't accept asexuality as a sexual form, of sexual orientation in its own right, and what can be done about this? I think it's mostly because people don't understand how someone can base a sexual attraction on the lack of wanting sex. Oh, so I'll read that again because I read it wrong. I think it's mostly because people don't understand how someone can base a sexual orientation, I said a sexual attraction, a sexual orientation on the lack of wanting sex. It seems contradictory. And also, they don't understand that someone can go through life without desiring sex at some point, even if it's just in some small way. To most people, wanting sex, at least subconsciously, is a natural part of life. I think the best way for asexuality to become accepted is for asexuals to tell their families and friends about their experiences. I agree with that. There's a lot of people that are like, why do I need to broadcast my asexuality? Why do I need to tell people? It's none of people's business. And obviously, it's up to them what they do, where they want to keep it private or not. But the more people that speak out to their friends and family, people they meet about asexuality, the more we can get it better known so society accepts it, so that asexuality is accepted as a whole in the world, and we don't have to hide or feel ashamed that people don't accept us for who we are or feel there's something wrong with us. I don't feel ashamed, by the way, but I know some asexuals might do. Some asexuals don't like being asexual because they feel excluded from society, excluded from relationships, excluded from conversations. And so it's very important that we help people to feel inclusive in society. That includes asexuals. And I do, when this person said to most people wanting sex at least subconsciously as a natural part of life, I got loads of guys when I was active on dating sites, time and time again, saying it's natural for someone to want sex. Even if I said to them, I'm asexual, I lack sexual attraction, I'm not interested in sex, they might be like, oh, that's fine. Then in the next breath, they're saying, next message, they're going, oh, but it's natural to want sex. That completely invalidates what I've just said when I said I don't want sex, because they're then saying it's natural to want sex, so they're saying it's not natural. And they're overriding my own feelings, thoughts, emotions, beliefs, and status on the sex thing. They're just dismissing it and validating it. It's so rude. It's really rude. And so I think it's not a good thing at all. And I think people don't understand how a sexual orientation can be based on a lack of something, but it makes sense because, like I said, not every person likes everything. And all the other sexual orientations that are sexual, such as bisexual, pansexual, homosexual, heterosexual, they all have sexual attraction involved, which means they all experience sexual attraction, which usually means that they want and like sex. Not necessarily all, because some heterosexuals can be penetration repulsed, for example. They might like doing other sexual acts. But there's going to be some people that don't like that don't want it, that don't need it. Just like there's some people who lack the appetite for chocolate cake and it makes them feel sick. There's going to be some people who lack the appetite for sex and feel sick by it, right? So a lack of something is not necessarily a bad thing. I keep saying this. You can lack something, but it's actually good. You can lack the ability to be unempathetic, meaning you have to be empathetic because empathy is part of your nature. You can lack the ability to have certain toxins in your body that are no good for you anyway. You can lack the ability to do something, but it actually might be to your benefit and to society's benefit. So just because you lack something doesn't mean to say it's a bad thing. It means you lacking something can have two meanings. One, you don't have enough of something. One, you don't have any of it. Right? So just because you don't have any of it or you don't have the usual amount of it doesn't mean to say it's wrong and that there's anything wrong with you. And I think lacking sexual attraction is like the cherry on the cake when it comes to sexual orientations. I think it's like the different flavour, if you like, the one that's badly needed to counteract all the sexual activity that goes on and sexual wanting, needing, and urging with all the other sexual orientations. I think it's nice to have a balance. I think it's great that there's a sexual orientation that lacks sexual attraction, that doesn't innately need, urge, or want for sex for the main part. I think that's a great thing. I think it adds balance to sexual orientations in general. I think it's a great thing. I think it should be celebrated. I really do. People like Battenberg cake because it's got different squares in not everyone likes Battenberg cake, but some squares are pink, some squares are yellow, and it has marzipan, doesn't it? Right, so it has different squares, different tastes. And some people have different layers of cream within cakes. Some people have different layers of cakes, full stop. Like you can get jam, raspberry jam filling, apricot jam, black cherry jam, or is it black currant jam? I don't eat jams. But you could have a cake with lots of different jams and lots of different creams on it. But you could still have a layer of sponge that's got on top, and say you don't put any cherry on the top, say you don't cover it in icing sugar, say you don't put any jam on top. and you've got this beautiful sponge that's just there on the top by itself in its natural form, not needing anything else. Well, it adds extra to the cake, doesn't it? Some people might think, I've had enough jams now, I want a layer of sponge that doesn't have all this jam or this cream. That just has sponge. Maybe you have lots of sponge. Some people like eating crusts of bread. They don't want all the bread, they just want the crust because it's different. It's an end piece, but actually that tastes the best. So what I'm trying to say is there might be something that's more plain and simple, as in not as in there's anything intellectually wrong with the person, but there might be something that's more plain and simple, as in they take the sexual component out. They don't need the sex, which is more simplistic to understand, because sex can be very complex and have lots of layers to it. Some people might just want a relationship without that because it's less complicated. It's got less layers to the relationship. It's got lots of other more interesting, more tasty, more vibrant, more fruity flavour. Because it's different. If you get my meaning. So yes, just because something lacks something doesn't mean to say it's a bad thing, because you might be able to see its more natural splendour in all its glory. You might notice that I don't usually wear makeup the majority of the time. I don't wear it. I don't feel I need it. I don't feel I've got to go and plaster my face with makeup or put any makeup on whatsoever to still look gorgeous, because I like the way I look. And if Guy tells me to go around putting makeup on, I find that really insulting. I'm like, you want me to put makeup for you to make myself look better? If you don't like me in my natural form, then you're not for me. Go and get with someone else who likes putting makeup on their face. I don't. It's actually very bad for the skin. I have huge sensitive skin. And luckily for me, again, a bonus, I lack the need, urge, and want to wear makeup. I mean, I haven't. Occasionally, in the past, I've worn makeup. It's not like I'll never wear makeup ever again, probably, but I just don't feel I need it, and I can do without it. Dude, I love that you're comfortable in your own skin. Need to feel that way more often. Oh, thank you so much, dude. Yeah, I do love I personally think a lot of makeup ages people, especially if they put it on their cheeks and their face. They're making their skin more dried out with the amount of makeup they're putting on, and they're taking it off. It actually helps them to be older quicker. Who wants to do that? Personally, I don't. So by not putting stuff that clogs the pores up on the skin, it's actually keeping your skin usually younger looking. And I've had a cyst on my eye, but luckily for me, and makeup would have made that worse. I got that in, when did I get that? December last year. It's gone down a lot now, but it took me ages to get it down. But if I put makeup on that, it would just make it worse, and it could make it flare up again. I don't even know if I got a cyst on the eye because I did put makeup on there. I actually had something in my eye at one point, which I think might have contributed to the cyst. I don't know exactly how. But in any case, by not putting makeup on, I'm actually helping it to heal. But luckily, even if you go back through my channel for years, you'll notice that majority of the time I don't wear makeup anyway, and I don't miss it. Now, if I was a person who wore a lot of makeup, right, for years of my life, then all of a sudden I got a cyst on my eye, I'm like, oh my God, I can't go out in public. I can't do my YouTube channel. I can't let anyone see me without makeup. It's such a bad thing because I'm lacking makeup. Do you know what I mean? Like, I would feel really bad about myself if I was that person, but I'm not. So my lack of needing to wear makeup is not a bad thing. It's a good thing because it gives me more confidence in my own natural beauty and being myself. I don't feel I need to wear makeup. And my lack of interest in makeup is a good thing. It's also showing women that you don't need to wear loads of makeup or any makeup at all to be shown in public, to go out. Actually, on the front cover of my diary confessions about hyper-romantic asexual 78 live lessons to age your life, there's no makeup. There might be makeup on the back one, I'm not sure, I can't remember. But I don't even know if there was on that, actually. But there's no makeup on the front of that. I'm on the front cover, I think the skin looks nice to say. That's not photoshopped, by the way. I've taken the background off it. So I have done something to the image as in taken the background. There's pictures of me online with this outfit in exactly the same pose with the background in my own home. But, there's no makeup and I haven't done anything else to the photograph apart from remove the background. I mean, I think that's amazing to look like that without photoshopping. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm very proud of that. And I want to show other women that, or whatever gender, that you don't have to wear makeup to look beautiful. Of course, some guys wear makeup these days, I'm not saying makeup's a bad thing. If you love makeup and you think it's amazing and that's how you naturally are, then fine. But I don't feel that I'm lacking in anything in my beauty that makeup can make up for. I think, if anything, makeup a lot of the time can make you look older, and it does age your skin a lot, usually. I do, like, if I was having makeup, which I did some of the time in the past, a bit of the time, a few times, then I would, like, wear glitter eyeshadow because I like glitter. I love glitter in general, but I don't feel the need to do that because I'm happy with who I am. I'm happy with my skin. I'm happy with the way I look. Without it, my fringe has all strange things that it does. My fringe is I love my hair to bits, but my fringe is a nightmare because it just has a mind of its own. Even if hairdressers cut it straight, it still ends up jagged in some ways. So I just have to think that's part of my flavour, right? My fringe lacks the ability to stay straight usually, and it usually ends up like whether I cut it or a professional hairdresser cuts it, it always ends up with it going kind of weird, like lopsided or something, or higher up one side than the other. And I don't even know how that's possible from professional hairdressers. I can understand if I'm doing it, but if it's professional hairdressers, they have just as much trouble with my fringe as I do. It also grows 3 times thicker than the rest of my hair. Why am I saying this? Because I'm saying that sometimes we can lack certain things that other people might have or do, but it doesn't mean to say it's a bad thing. It means it's part of our flavor. It's part of our nuance. It's part of our abilities that other people don't have. The fact that I lack interest in makeup is a huge benefit for me because I can walk out the door without having to worry about not putting makeup on my face because I'm like that all the time, not putting makeup on my face because I lack interest in it. Just like people who lack interest in sex have huge benefits. Like if they lack interest in sex and they don't want sex and they don't have sex, they, unless sex was forced upon them, but let's take it that it's not. So they're not having sex, everything's good, right? They're not going to have sexually transmitted diseases or infections. They lack sexually transmitted diseases or infections if they're never having sex, never had sex, never doing any sexual stuff, right? That lack of sexual diseases is great. Right, so just because someone lacks something doesn't mean to say it's a bad thing. Not everyone has to be doing everything and having everything in their life. And it's ridiculous when people just see the word lack as a complete negative all the time. On every batteries have a minus and a plus. They don't just have 2 pluses, they have a minus and a plus. So you could argue the minus means they're always lacking in something, the plus means they're always adding something. There's still always a minus to a plus. So therefore, lacking in something exists just as much as plussing something exists. And lacking in something, minusing something is just as valid as plussing something. Do you see what I mean? Without plus, a minus wouldn't exist. Without minus, a plus wouldn't exist. So therefore, asexuality and people that lack sexual attraction are adding to the world in a positive way. By adding the lack of something, we're actually balancing out the world. We're balancing out the sexualities. We're presenting a good flavour of sexuality. We're having that component that's been missing for so many years. It's not actually been missing as in the sense it never existed. It's been missing as in the recognition of it. And this is why it's important. Right. Joel's story. Why do you feel in general that society doesn't accept asexuality as a form of sexual orientation in its own right, and what can be done about this? Scientifically speaking, humans and dolphins are the only mammals who have sex for pleasure. So it makes sense that non-asexuals would have a hard time accepting that there would be people born who don't have any sexual desire or drive, no need for sex. There are also people who feel that it is something chemical, a flux of hormones or brain chemicals that any doctor could fix with the right pill. It's no different than those who think anything other than heterosexuality can be fixed and will dissipate with time and visibility. So, yeah, I do think over time, the more people are exposed to asexuality, the more people will accept it. I do think when I was reading this, right, when this person, Joel, was saying there are also people who feel that there is something chemical, a flux of hormones or brain chemicals that any doctor could fix with the right pill. I was actually thinking there is something chemical, a flux of hormones or brain chemicals that induce people to experience sexual attraction and being sex obsessed. And that people think there's a pill to fix that. Because I was thinking about people being sex mad. Like, why are people focused on the people that don't want sex? Why aren't they focused on fixing the people that are sex obsessed that actually have an addiction? Because how we know addictions are unhealthy in general, right? So why aren't they fixing? Because like sex addicts, it's like it is a chemical reaction, it's a hormone or chemical reaction thing in a person's body. It's like it's people can have chemistry that's very addictive. People have chemistry and things, feel good chemicals, feel good hormones firing off when they might watch sexual stuff, right? For asexuals who are sex repulsed and porn repulsed, and be like, opposite. Right? But why isn't doctors saying, oh, you're sex obsessed, let's fix that problem with a pill? Why are they hell bent on saying stuff to asexual people, saying, oh, let's give you a pill to stop you being asexual? Why aren't we equally saying that to heterosexuals if that's the case? For sex obsessed heterosexuals. Do you know what I mean? Like, the site is just screwed up in that way. It's like, why aren't people seeing that addiction to sex is a really bad thing? It's very bad for society as well, because it does lead to a lot of things that are unsavory, that end up in sexual abuse situations, that can end up in violence or can end up in trafficking, human trafficking, and all sorts of stuff. Can end up with girls doing porn stuff they don't want to do. And it's not good. And so why are people applauded for having a very sex obsession, and people that are not interested in sex, why are we put down or dismissed or ignored or ridiculed? It makes absolutely no sense. Only that the people who are tolerating, accepting, and inviting more people to have a sex in relationship, the people that need it themselves are probably obsessed and couldn't live without it. People who've got a balanced view, it's like, oh, well, some people have sex, some people don't have sex. That's what we need. We need doctors and psychologists and counselors saying, some people have sex, some people don't have sex. Either one is fine, right? But any extreme of wanting, needing, and having to have sex is really bad. So why aren't people focused on giving those people a pill? Instead, they're giving pills to people who are impotent, for example. Not asexual, but I'm talking about impotent. And of course, there might be some asexuals that are impotent, but impotency is not the same as being asexual. But why is it people are given pills to stop them being impotent so they can get it up to have sex, rather than people just accepting, okay, it's okay if you're not having sex. You can still be loved. It's not the be all and end all of life. You can have life without sex. You can have love without sex. It's just very, very why are people popping pills or giving pills to people who are not having sex, trying to make them have sex, when surely they should be giving pills to people, if they're going to give pills to everyone or anyone, who are sex obsessed and actually got an addiction, which have an actual medical problem or mental problem with addiction. But are they giving pills to those people, telling them, well, here's a pill to stop you having sex because you're having too much of it? Probably not. Although there are some cases medically where someone can be have sexual dysfunction where they're always like aroused constantly in their body and they have like a sexual problem. They might give medication to some of those people that are literally are in a arousal state 24/7 or whatever. It's a sexual dysfunction disorder or something. So they might give it in those cases. But the majority of time, society is geared towards giving pills to people who they think lack stuff like wanting to have sex because there's something wrong, rather than treating other people who do have sex, who are absolutely obsessed with it, as wrong. Why is it one rule for one and not the same rule for the other? Why aren't they giving pills to the other people? Instead of just giving pills to people who they're saying, oh, well, you can't have sex, have Viagra to make you have an erection, for example, to have sex. But all the sex obsessed and porn obsessed people, they're just like, oh no, they don't need a pill. They can just leave them, you know? So it's just ridiculous. Why aren't there pills to stop them being sex obsessed? If they're going to give pills to people who can't have sex, who are impotent, for example, it makes no sense. It's just so unequal. Such conditioning. I can only assume that heterosexuality and sex obsession was born from people who were and are sex obsessed, and they just keep the conditioning going by constantly pumping out sex and the next sexy outfit, the next sex book, the next sex toy, the next sex this, that, and the other. Right? I'm not saying sex is a bad thing for everyone. I'm just saying that why is it they're hell-bent on making someone who doesn't want sex need it or like it wrong when people are out there with genuine addictions to sex and pornography, which is very unhealthy, and they're not doing anything about that, right? It's just very unbalanced. And I think the world needs to be more balanced, which is why asexuality is such a beautiful thing. Right, so let's see. Okay, Elle Hardwick's story. Why does Elle feel that in general society doesn't accept asexuality as a sexual form, as a form? I keep saying as a sexual form of sexual orientation. Instead of saying why does Elle feel in general that society doesn't accept asexuality as a form of sexual orientation in its own right and what can be done about it? We as a society place a lot of esteem on sex, sex sells, etc., and not having the same regard is seen as odd or unnatural. A greater media representation would go a long way to normalizing asexuality. And I have to have some water because my throat's getting dry. And I'm going to start coughing. Excuse me. Thank you. So, yes, as I was saying, I do agree because as a society, a lot of esteem is placed on sex. And as I said, sex does sell. It's a huge industry, sex. I sometimes think about doing books based on. I have got an Asexual Guide to Sex book that I need to finish, which I started working on in 2019. And you might think, why am I doing a book for sex for asexuals or about asexuality and sex? Well, it makes no sense because some asexuals do want to take part in sex and they don't know what the hell they're doing. And there is asexuals like that I know in groups. And I'll start that book in 2019. I have to finish it this year. It'll be 5 years. As a sex repulsed asexual, the first two and a half years I was working on it, I got myself very sex repulsed out because when I had to do the book, I'm a lot better now because it made me kind of desensitized to sex a lot. But for the first like two and a half years of doing the book, I used to feel physically sick doing it. Now I've got used to it and now I can talk about sex a lot more. And I guess it's helped me in that way, but it's kind of hard. But I'm asexual, has had sex in the past, so I know what I'm talking about. I was in heterosexual relationships for a lot of my life. And so I do know what I'm talking about in that respect. But I've sometimes thought about writing more books for sex because I do know about it. And it would be quite interesting just to see an asexual write about sex, how good I could write about it, because I have a lot more I think about practical stuff more and the application of stuff more because I'm not actively involved in that anymore and doing that, you know? So yeah. And when they say sex sells, I'm like, you know, it's just kind of crazy because it's like a drug to people, you know. But yeah, that's why people rave about sex so much, because it just gets into their mind. So I'm not saying sex is a bad thing. I'm not saying people can't have it, but I just think that they should still, as a society, respect asexuality, and they should understand the value of having a sexual orientation that's largely based on a lack of sexual attraction, and those asexuals who don't have the innate need, desire, or want for partner sexual intercourse. They should be thinking, hey, this is a miracle. This is great. There's some people that don't need that, whereas other people are obsessed with sex and got a genuine addiction to it. And there's people that are opposite of that. I mean, what can the people that are sex addicts and got genuine problems with porn addiction, what can they learn from asexuals? Those who don't want it, don't need it, don't have porn in their life, don't even want to look at that ever. You know, instead of like seeing asexuality as a bad thing, why aren't they seeing it as a good thing? Why aren't they seeing it as a solution to have more asexual perspectives in the world? I think they're missing something. I think they're lacking the knowledge that we need. And if they took us more seriously and allowed us to explain asexuality more, then it would be much better. Light shade. It's like a drug. Yes, I agree. Oh, lots of love, light shade. It's lovely to see you. We haven't seen each other for a while. I know I'm not actually seeing you, but I'm looking into the camera seeing you. And yeah, but it is like a drug, you know, and then asexuality is shoved to the side, I feel, or invalidated, whereas really they should be saying, what can we learn from asexuals? What can we learn from those asexuals who are sex repulsed, who don't get the need, urge, or want for partner sexual intercourse, and are really not interested in porn or sex? I know there's quite a number of asexuals that are still interested in porn. I do get that, but not all of us are. And I just feel that they could learn so much from us. So instead of pushing us aside and thinking, oh, there's something wrong, they could actually think, well, what's right about that? What's good about it? Light shade, loads of love. It's great to see you too. Oh, yeah. It's lovely to see you. So, yeah, I definitely think something needs to be done about it to make people understand and realize that, you know, asexuality is a beautiful thing, and it's a missing piece we've needed of sexuality for so long. Right. Let's go to Callie's story now, page 274, if you've got the book and following along with Asexual Perspectives. I'm going to read it out anyway. So, why do you feel in general that society doesn't accept asexuality as a form of sexual orientation in its own right, and what can be done about this? I suspect that it is because asexuality does not fit the general view of sexual orientation the way it is taught. I would agree with that. It is taught as being who you are sexually attracted to, and no one is not regarded as a valid answer except for in children. So people see it as something abnormal, something that needs to be fixed. In my view, all that can be done is educational efforts until people learn about asexuality along with the other sexual orientations. It won't be widely accepted as just another form of sexual orientation. I do think it should be widely accepted with the other sexual orientations, because it should be like heterosexuality, homosexuality, pansexuality, bisexuality, asexuality. It should be known like that just as much. And I do think that, yeah, everyone's orientation apart from asexuality is based on who they're sexually attracted to. That's why there is a difficulty with the LGBT plus community. Now, A in the LGBT plus QIA does stand for asexual, but it also can stand for other things like agender, for example, and in more recent years, aromantic. I don't know why aromantic is in there, because aromanticism is a lack of romantic attraction. It's to do with romantic attraction or non-romantic attraction. Aromanticism is non-romantic attraction, or aromanticism, absence of romantic attraction. But that's not an actual sexual orientation. An aromantic person can be asexual or sexual. So I don't really understand exactly why that's in with LGBT plus stuff. But anyway, ace meant to stand for agender as well, which again is gender rather than sexual orientation. But the thing is with the LGBTQ plus community, apart from asexuals, their sexual orientation is still based on sexual attraction, whereas we're based on a lack of sexual attraction. So I think it makes it harder, unless asexuality is well known in its own right as well as this different sexual orientation to all the other sexual orientations, which it is, because the other ones are based on sexual attraction, who they're sexually attracted to, whereas ours is based on who we're not sexually attracted to or the lack of sexual attraction. I think until there's differentiation like that, and it's very difficult for us to be accepted as asexuals as like the fifth sexual orientation, if you like. So heterosexuality, homosexuality, pansexuality, bisexuality, the fifth being asexuality. Because if we're clumped with LGBT and that's only how we're seen, for example, by heterosexuals, we're not seen as any different, but we are different because our sexual orientation is based on a lack of sexual attraction. And that's a very important distinction that should be enabled to have visibility in the world in its own right. Because if it's not, how is it any different? People, heterosexuals, just like think, oh, you're part of LGBT plus, cool, or maybe not if they're not open-minded or accepting of that. But they don't understand that there's a sexual orientation that's based on the lack of sexual attraction, which in the main means asexuals do not have an innate need, desire, urge, or want for partner sexual intercourse. Yes, asexuality is a spectrum. And yes, there are sex positive asexuals, those that have sex. But again, how is that impacting the world and showing there are people that don't want sex? For the asexuals that love sex, will take part in sex, enjoy it, are positive about it, their relationships are very similar to traditional heterosexual or traditional pansexual, bisexual, whatever gender you're into. They're very similar to, in practice, to sexual relationships. If they're having sex, they're sex positive and they're having just as much sex as a heterosexual couple, for example. But there needs to be some differentiation to help show the world that it's okay to have love without sex. It's okay to have a relationship without sex. It's okay for people to lack sexual attraction, because it doesn't mean to say they are lacking as a person. It doesn't mean to say they're any less worthy of being in life or being in a relationship, because we need to stop thinking that lack automatically equates to something missing as a negative thing. Because, like I've said, some things that are lack or missing or not there is actually a positive in some ways. People who lack the ability to have fights, for example, they don't believe in fighting. Their value system is, I'm not going to punch someone in the face, right? That lack is a good thing. They're missing the ability to be so angry that they could punch someone in the face. That's a good thing they're lacking that. It's a good they're missing that, right? So just because someone lacks something doesn't mean to say there should always be negative connotations to that thing. It can actually mean that maybe it's purer, or maybe it's less violent, or maybe it's a healthier thing. So we need to break away from this idea that a lack of something is a bad thing, and start thinking that sometimes lacking some things that other people have is advantageous, is a positive, is giving a different vibrancy in the world, a different frequency in the world, a different way of having happiness, exploring happiness, being happy without the same things that everyone else needs to be happy. Some people need less things to be happy. Some people need less possessions to be happy. No one goes around saying, oh, your home has got less items in it because they're lacking this, that, and the other that I think should be there. Therefore, you must be miserable in your life. Actually, there's so many YouTube channels that are doing minimalistic videos that are specializing in cutting clutter down in your home and being minimalistic. Well, if you think about the asexuals that lack sexual attraction, that don't have a need, urge, or want for partner sexual intercourse, that means there's one less barrier to loving that person, because you don't have to have sex with that person to love you. Because our love is not based on genitalia or based on sex. You know, you're getting rid of some of the relationship clutter, if you like, if you want to see it in that way, if you want to see it in a different light, a positive light. You're removing an obstacle that doesn't need to be there, because you don't have to have sex in order to love someone. Just think how many people are in relationships who do experience sexual attraction, do have sex. Are they having sex 24/7 and never going to work? No, of course they're not. There are times when they might spend 9 hours at work, 10 hours at work, 12 hours at work. They're out having sex with their partner. They're not going to work going, oh, for the 12 hours I'm at work, or for the 9 hours, or however many hours they're at work, I'm not loving my partner because I'm not having sex with them. Of course they're not saying that. Light shade, wise words. Thank you, light shade. Lots of love. So we need to be looking at things completely differently. And we need to be stopping thinking that lack means there's something wrong. And we need to start appreciating that a minus something, a taking away of something, can actually reap rewards and make things a lot more crystal clear, a lot more focused. Just like someone who wants to declutter their home and thinks that's a good thing. I'm not saying it's good for everyone to do that. I mean, it can be a relief, but for people who like get a great deal of comfort from having things around them, to take loads of things away from them might not feel good. They might lose their sense of place. They might feel that the place is too drab with not enough items in it. It's too minimalistic. It's too clinical, and they don't like it. But for other people, for all the channels that love minimalistic living, that get rid of loads of stuff in their home, that have very minimal amount of objects, they like having a lack of stuff in their home because it brings them more peace and joy, because they've got less to worry about, less to dust, and they've got more space. So if you think about that translating into a relationship without the sex, you've got less sexual clutter. You've got more space for other things to be focusing on in the relationship to help it to be healthy and better. And as we know, some people use sex as a band-aid to cover up problems and cracks in the relationship that should be fixed and addressed. And people can end up staying in the wrong relationships because of sex. Equally, some people could promise they won't have sex with you, but could also be using it in a negative way to say, oh, you're not going to get a person that's better than me that won't have sex with you, because everyone needs sex. Again, that's very damaging, and it's also not true, and it's coercion, right? And the more we're aware of asexuality and the fact you don't have to have sex in a relationship for it to be healthy and happy, and there are other people out there that have the same mindset and want the same things, as in to not have sex and still have a beautiful relationship, the more we can get away from people like that who tell us, oh, you can't have a relationship with anyone else. No one else will want you if you don't want sex, so have it with me. Have a relationship with me. It's absolutely ludicrous. Blackmail, emotional blackmail, and all the rest of it. So we need to open people's eyes to asexuality, but not just asexuality in and of itself, which is fantastic, but the benefits it provides. And the fact of this word lacks sexual attraction doesn't have to be a negative thing. It can be a very positive thing. And that has a good place in society, has a good place in developing relationships in healthier ways without the sex. I think asexuality is amazing, and I think it's not given enough importance in society. I really do. So let's go now to how many more. I think I've got 2 more stories I'd like to cover. Right, okay. So Ari's story, Asexual Perspectives. If you're reading along, we're on page 285 of the printed edition. You can get a copy of this from Amazon or good bookshops in case you haven't got a copy and want another. Well, want one. I was going to say want another one, then give one to a friend. So why do you feel in general that society doesn't accept asexuality as a form of sexual orientation in its own right, and what can be done about this? This is Ari's story. I'm not sure. I get the impression most people really want to be having sex. And while they can vaguely understand some people want to have sex with different people than they do, or the wrong people, not being interested in having sex as a general statement is totally outside of their expectations. Oh no, outside of their experiences. I was going to say outside of their expectations because it is really, isn't it? Plus the social pressure that there must always be a romantic subplot. The person isn't a real adult until they're having sex and in a relationship. I hate that. I mean, I'm romantic, but again, I don't think you have to have romance in a relationship to make it healthy, happy one. There doesn't have to be a romantic. For me, because I'm a hyper romantic, then I would need romance because my nature is hyper romantic. But I don't think that every relationship has to have romance in it and or sex in it to make it an actual relationship. And I think it's very wrong and damaging that people think that's the case. And like I write in my diary confessions of a hyperromantic asexual 78 life as the Asexual Life best-selling book, which is on Amazon, nobody should be defining the relationship other than the people who are in it. It's so important, right? So, Ari, what can be done about this? Again, I don't know. Representation would help. Showing people we exist, and it's just the way some people are, and it's not these various negative stereotypes. Even within the LGBT community, I know a lot of people haven't heard of asexuality. Showing people that there are asexuals who remain asexual their entire lives and were happy and fulfilled anyway. Yes, I think that's important because there's this stereotype that if you're asexual, not having sex, that you'll lead a miserable life, that you've got no excitement, no fun in your life, and it must be so boring. I personally can testify that that is not the case. I love my life in general. I'm not saying every moment of every day is good because no day is perfect. I've got injuries at the moment to my back, which is not the happiest times of my life. But I'm here now. I'm loving doing this and I love writing, especially for asexuals. And there's lots of good things in life that I thoroughly enjoy, and I post a lot of the videos from where I visit on this channel. Why? To show you how beautiful an asexual life actually is and lifestyle. The fact that I don't have sex, but I go out and self-date at the cinema. Sunday, it's now gone through to Sunday, right? And I self-date every Sunday. I make a point of taking myself out to the cinema usually. That's where I go for my date and watch a different movie each week. And I love that. So it's really important to do things for yourself and what makes you happy in life. And I have a fantastic life without sex. I love the fact that I go to London sometimes. I've actually booked to go to a Bollywood theatre performance in London on the 15th of August, which is actually a reward for me having a blood test on the 8th of August, which I don't even like to say the word because I got a phobia against blood and needles really badly. But the doctors said because of my back injuries, it's suspicious how I did it. It's not normal. So they want to test me for worse things, which I don't hope I don't have either of those two worst things. One of them is so bad, but they're both not good. And so my point is that I'm going back to London. When I went to London last time, I've still got some shorts videos to post, by the way, from that. You'll see I went to the aquarium, I went to London Zoo, and I post these so that you can see how fantastic a life I have with my asexuality. I'm having fun. I want to be able to inspire the asexuals that you can have a fantastic life without sex. Because some asexuals don't like being asexual. They feel down about it. They feel like can't have a normal life, or what the hell is normal? No one knows. It's all subjective, but they feel that it might make them miserable. For some asexuals, they don't want to be asexual, right? But I want to show you can have a fantastic life being asexual, not having sex. With all the sex I'm not having, I'm being productive. I'm writing books, I'm YouTubing on this channel, I'm going to different places on my own without a partner. I don't need to be in a relationship to make myself happy. I went to the Paddington Experience in London, which I still have some shorts videos to upload, but you can't actually see in the Paddington Experience because we're not allowed to film in there. But you can see the beginning bit before we go in it. So I took some footage of that, and I've got to upload those videos soon. I've still got a few aquarium ones to post yet. And it was a wonderful experience. I've never been to the Paddington Experience in all my life, and I loved it, right? And it's so much fun. It's an interactive experience. You go on like a 3D bus, so the you're on the bus, and the bus has moving screens across the windows, and then you go through different rooms, and they're telling a Paddington story, and you're having to do different activities. There were some things I couldn't do because I've got injuries, and so they had to give me something else to do. I had to sit down and do stuff. So one was build a Paddington jigsaw puzzle, and we had to pick these big heavy pieces up off the floor, and I said I can't do that because I can't bend down and do stuff like that. So they gave me this little jigsaw puzzle to do by myself at a table. I did it really quickly. I think I did it quicker than any of the people with the big pieces with the Paddington Bear stuff. There was also another thing where we had to go into this room, and we had to make things, cooking things, which I hate cooking, but I post a lot of videos for food because people like seeing what I love to eat, because there's an asexual joke that cake is better than sex and food is better than sex. That's why I post a lot of food videos. People like seeing what I'm eating. I actually eat quite healthily, if you probably noticed. Some people are like, that's so bland or it's so gross. I can't have sauces and things on things. They have to be plain for my tummy, and actually they're better for health if they're plain. If you mix and put loads of sugar and rubbish on it, it's not actually healthy. So I have to have plain foods, and then I post my food. And so I want to show you that you can have a beautiful things to munch on and enjoy with your food, not involving sex. You can have lots of sensual stuff to eat, which tastes nice, and you can have good feelings with what you're eating. You can do fun activities like you've seen. I've been to Shrek Adventureland before in London a number of times, so I post videos about the zoo, post videos about aquarium. I love my asexual life. I love the fact I don't have sex. I love the fact that I don't have to worry about pregnancy. I don't have to worry about sexually transmitted diseases or infections. I don't have to worry about bed sheets, changing them because they get messy. I don't have to worry about stuff like that. I don't have to worry about trying to do sexual stuff and doing that type of thing. I don't have to worry about any of that in my life, and it's good. I like it. I've been sex free because I am an asexual who has sex in the past. I've been sex free now since 2011, and it's 2024, and I'm doing this show live at the moment. And so, yeah, it's a long time without sex, which I'm really glad about. I'm grateful for. So I love my life, and I do post a lot of shorts videos about my life and what I'm up to, so people can see that an asexual life is great. It's fun. It's fun to go and do stuff. Who wants to be an adult if that means you've got to have sex and lead a plain, boring life? Some people might have sex in their life, but they might be bored in lots of other ways. They might never go and have experiences in London like a Shrek Adventureland or Paddington experience, or I've been to War of the Worlds in the past experience as well. They might never do that. And obviously some sexuals do that. There's a lot of heterosexuals that do go and do that. But I'm just saying that people might be like going to a hotel in London together. They're busy having sex together. Therefore, they haven't got as much time to do these activities. That's a benefit of not having sex because I've got time to do it. It's a benefit of being single, actually, that I can devote more time to doing what I like and love. So there's benefits of not having sex. I know people who have sex will say there's benefits of having sex. But there's also benefits of not having sex as well. And I think they're just as valid. Right? Just as valid. So, we're going to take one more perspective. This is Jen Mullen's story, which is on page 296. If you've got the printed book of Asexual Perspectives, you can get a copy of this from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Waterstones, Blackwell's, Walmart, and lots of other good bookshops. So, Jen Mullen's story. Why do you feel in general that society doesn't accept asexuality as a form of sexual orientation in its own right and what can be done about this. People are so obsessed with sex, especially LGBT people, because so much of LGBT is about who you have sex with. I think some people put too much stock in their sex lives, and when they see people who can be completely happy without that, they feel threatened because they think that their relationships have to have sex to be fulfilling. Maybe they worry that if their sexual prowess fades, their lover will leave, while people who are in a relationship for romance don't have to worry as much. I think that's a really good point. It goes very well with what we're saying as well. And it's very interesting, the juxtaposition of this, right? So this person is saying maybe they worry if their sexual prowess fades, their lover will leave, while people who are in a relationship for romance don't have that much to worry about. So they're saying maybe the sexual people worry if they're in a relationship and they stop wanting, liking, need sex, that their partner will leave them. Whereas people who don't base their relationships on sex in the first place or don't have that as a component don't have to worry about that, do they? If they have a partner who says they accept them without sex, and for example a monogamous partner, then they don't have to worry about their partner leaving them for not having the sex that they've had before if they didn't have sex in the first place. So I think that's a huge benefit of being asexual as well. Of course, there are some people that are in relationships with sexuals and the sexual is going to cheat on the asexual. Unfortunately, that does happen, and it's sad because I think if you definitely want sex and know that, don't be with someone who's asexual and doesn't want sex ever. It's not going to work and you're not compatible. But there is a lot of people, I agree, in the LGBT community who do put a lot of stock in sex, and that is how asexuals are different, because we lack sexual attraction in the main. Like I said earlier, we need recognition in its own right for asexuality, not just part of LGBT community. And it's my mission, if you didn't already know this, to get asexuality recognised as a sexual orientation in its own right throughout the globe, so that no asexual has to live in fear of ridicule ever again. This isn't me saying we're not part of LGBT plus, because we are, whether I like it or I don't like it, it doesn't matter. We are part of that community, right? So it's not to take away from that, but this is to say, hey, we deserve our own recognition in our own right, because it's important that asexuals are distinguished. Distinguished, is that the right word to use? Or are seen as different, are differentiated from the other sexual orientations, to show that we are different, to show that some people, the asexual, for example, who are sex repulsed, don't have sex, don't want it, like it, don't need it. I know asexuality is a spectrum, and some people have it and are positive, but those who don't want it, like it, need it, don't have it. It's important the world knows they exist, because that can help. I truly believe this can help stop or prevent some sexual abuse situations that are currently probably going on right now as we speak, and we're fortunate enough to be here and not be having that experience, because there are so many people telling people in the world sex is a natural part of a relationship, sex is what has got to be had in a relationship for it to be healthy and happy, sex is expected, sex is what you have to do. This is damaging, very, very damaging. It's damaging people's mindsets, it's damaging people's bodies, it's damaging people's lifestyle, it's damaging. I'm not saying it's wrong to have sex, I'm saying it's damaging to say it's that important to a relationship and it can only be a healthy and happy relationship with sex. That is not true. You can have a healthy, happy relationship without sex, because sex is not love. Even if you have sex, it doesn't make you compatible. Without compatibility, you don't have a healthy relationship. Even with sex, that doesn't mean to say you have a deep emotional connection with the person. If you don't have a deep emotional connection person, you're not going to be bonded together, and you're not going to want to stay loving towards each other, consistent and persistent, and be there for each other through thick and thin. It's not going to be healthy. You've got to be connected emotionally. If you've got unhealthy communication, if you don't talk about each other's needs, wants, desires, likes, interests, and growth together and individually, but you're just having sex, that's not a healthy relationship. It's not sex that makes a relationship healthy. It's communication, compatibility. That is very important, and our needs being met. Yes, compatibility does cover the need for sex or not. It does. That's important. Thank you for the love and all the emojis in the chat I've seen. Lots of love to you. But it's really important. This asexuality is really important. It's important that asexuality is known and that there are people on the asexual spectrum who don't want, like, or need sex. Because people need to know this from an early age growing up, and people need to know it's okay to have a relationship without sex. It's okay. It still can be healthy. It still can be happy. Providing people are compatible and are able to communicate effectively, are able to share their needs, wants and desires, are able to work together as a team. You can't have a relationship. I talk about this in the life lessons in this book. You can't have a relationship and be part of a team if it's not a team effort. Right? So a relationship requires lots of different things. And obviously, like I said, sexuality does play into compatibility. If one person, thanks like shade for the kiss, if someone wants sex, the other person doesn't, and they're just complete opposites like that, then yes, that's not going to work. But if someone's got sex in the relationship, but they don't have compatibility in other ways, they don't have good communication skills, then it's not going to be healthy. You can't just say sex is what makes a relationship healthy. It's not. And without sex, it can't be healthy. That's not true. Of course, if someone needs sex as a vital component of a need in a relationship and they don't have it, then it's not going to be healthy for that person. Just like if an asexual person doesn't want, like, or need sex and the person they're with really wants that, that's not going to be healthy. So they can't be together. But you don't have to have sex in every single relationship in the world for it to be healthy. Because for some people, they don't want, like, or need sex. And there are asexuals that are married to other asexuals, for example, and they're both sex repulsed and they're not having sex. And they're happily married without sex. So there are people that are actually having healthy, happy relationships in the world without sex. Lifelong commitments. So I think this is really important to recognise. And it's important to recognise that asexuality does warrant being recognised in its own right, not just part of LGBT plus community. And it's important to recognise that there are people in the world that don't want, like, or need sex, and that is okay. That is perfectly valid. No one's broken for being like that. There isn't something missing or something wrong with them. It's not they just haven't found the right person yet. It's not they need their hormones checking. It's not any of that. It's just we're different. We don't have the same configuration, if you like, as other people do. And that's okay. Everyone's different. Everyone's nuanced. And that's a beautiful thing. And we, like I said a number of times, a lack of sexual attraction doesn't mean to say we're lacking and there's something missing with us. As in, we're not lacking worthiness. We're not lacking love. We can still have the capacity to love someone deeply. We just love in different ways. And that is okay. And it's valid. And it's acceptable. And it's perfectly fine to be that way. If we're lacking in sexual attraction, that can be a positive thing. Like I've said multiple times on this stream or replay, if you're watching it on the replay, then it's okay if you don't have something, as in you have a lack of something, because that can be a positive thing and a benefit too. And I've given a number of analogies about that tonight, including people who declutter their home. They have a lack of things in their home, but they actually feel better for it, refreshed, invigorated, revived, alive more, got more space to do things, got more space to focus on other things, more energy. So there's a lot of positives to people actually lacking things or taking things away or not having those things that other people might have, because they reap rewards and benefits from being focused on other things in their life that those particular things that they took away or lacked or didn't have would clutter up their life with, or maybe even cluttering other people's lives up with, that they don't realize it. So think of lack of sexual attraction as a beautiful thing for some people, and it actually adds variety to life and a beautiful nuanced shade to asexuality, because every asexual is different, but also adds a nuance to sexualities in general. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please grab a copy of Asexual Perspectives book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Waterstones, Blackwell's or Walmart, or any good bookshops. And don't forget a copy of Diary Confessions of a Hyper-Romantic 78 Life Lessons to Ace Your Life. Both of these are best-selling asexual books, and you can learn a lot from them. Thank you so much for being in the chat, X-Dude and Lightshade. Love you both. Thank you everyone who's been watching tonight. I've really appreciated you being here. Or it might be daytime where you are, it might be morning. Happy afternoon, happy morning, wherever you are. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon if you haven't already. There are lots of people that watch this channel, but they're not actually subscribed. And when you subscribe, it helps raise awareness of asexuality, gets more eyeballs on this channel, which helps again to educate people. On this channel, I aim to educate, inform, entertain, and show lifestyle videos and vlogs of asexuality, and how awesome and awesome it is to live an asexual life. So if you like information, entertainment, lifestyle, and educational videos, please subscribe for more asexual perspectives. I'll see you soon on the next video live stream. Lots of love. Stay ace. And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you like it. Really appreciate it. Thank you for your support and love. As always, take care. And it's been amazing. Amazing.